I think with that, um, here we are. We are live tonight in front of thousands of people to have our November meeting. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start with the agenda and mission moment. Before we do, I want to thank everyone. Just last month was a really just terrific, productive meeting, just straight up, period. And then it was nice to see some of you in person at the high school, and nice to get some food afterwards. So thank you for making time for that. And I look forward to doing it again in January. So I think with that, here's the agenda for tonight. You've seen it, saw it yesterday. I think we'll probably spend a good portion of our time tonight looking at some data on the dashboard, digging into some IA data within the Student Learning Committee report out, and then thinking about and discussing strategic planning, namely development work over the coming months, year, perhaps 2 years. So look forward to those deep dives within the fuller agenda tonight. And I think with that, we'll start with our mission moment. So here we are. Tonight's mission moment is about mentoring and just the power it plays in how people learn, kids, adults alike. And so there have been a few traces or glimpses of the power of mentoring over the past week or two that I've caught onto that I thought I'd share tonight and maybe say a bit more about, I think, what it means for us as a school. And so example one is on the left, that's our volleyball teams. And I say teams because there are actually 3 teams represented here in various forms. We've got a middle school team, 2 middle school teams, a JV and varsity team, as well as our high school team represented, where they had a chance to practice together recently. And I think that's been a more common occurrence across sports teams. But with this group of student athletes, they've been doing it more so and more often. And so I think through that, able to learn from one another, able to have some role models to speak with and confide in, friendships, interactions, all of those things. And so it's powerful. The second photo on the right is of a group of students and some of our staff on a trip to St. Francis College here in Brooklyn. That was last week. You'll see a student sitting down second from the left with a peace sign up. That's Anaya Hayes. She was our valedictorian last year. She's now her first year at St. Francis. And she took time out of her day just to meet with some of our students who are featured here, as well as some others, to show them around and give them a tour of the school, talk about her experiences at school in her first few months there. Anaya is pretty amazing as a human being and is off to do great things, no doubt. And so I think it's powerful for her to hear, or for our students, our seniors now, to hear from her about her experiences, what she's thinking about, what challenges she's faced, how she's working through them. It just kind of brings some of these big, important decisions and unknowns for kids to a clearer level. And so it was nice to sort of see that happening. I think it's, again, powerful. Third example was today. We had our National Honor Society induction ceremony earlier this week, middle school, high school together, taking part in that. It was actually last Thursday. So we had our middle school kids interacting with our high school kids and being able to just get a sense of each other. But today we had our first meeting with the high school chapter and conducted a round robin on just sort of brainstorming ideas for the year on initiatives that we might take part in. And through that activity, there were multiple students that mentioned mentoring, tutoring, support of other students as a way in which they could serve our school and community. I thought that was powerful. And so I think we've all had mentors before, professionally and at school, and we know sort of the advantages and the uniqueness in learning it provides. But I'm seeing our kids in our 11th year have that closer to them and easier to sort of experience because of our growth as a school, and now spanning 6 through 12 and beyond. So I think it bodes well for mission, kids feeling empowered, kids feeling confident, and going off and doing really impressive things. So to mentoring tonight, that's the mission moment. So I think with that, we're going to move into the second agenda item for tonight, and that is current headlines. And so we are 45 days into school, quarter one in the books, and moving into the near winter season as we move into Thanksgiving and then December. So certainly a lot to celebrate and tout, things to continue to work on and get better at over time. I'm going to take you through some of the headlines over the past month, so you have a sense of where we are as a school. Feel free to stop me at any point in time and either double down on questions or offer insights, any of those things. But please chime in. Enrollment wise, we're in a steady state, so no changes from the last month. I think we're up one overall, so nothing to report out there. From a staffing perspective, we're also in the same place we were last month. We've got 2 key vacancies at the middle school that we're continuing to interview for and screen for. Just haven't landed the ideal candidates for those positions, so they still are open. From a leadership development standpoint, I think there's some things going on here at the school this year that we haven't done in the past that I think bodes well for leadership skill overall and the way in which we go about making hard decisions skillfully and in supporting and encouraging and nudging and getting the best out of our team. So I'm not going to go through this list, but just know that I think frequency wise and meaningfully wise, there's more development that our leaders are taking part in than I think ever before. Maybe a quick shout out here. I want to shout out Juliana for putting me in touch. Actually, no, for offering me the opportunity to shadow her with some of her folks at one of her schools last month, and then for making it possible for Melissa to take part in a similar sort of session this week. So thank you for that, Juliana. Beyond that, as you know, we had IAs in late October, and so we're going to share out the results from the middle school today. Last week, we also held what we call a DAP day, or Data Analysis and Action Planning Day, where we look at results and build out response plans according to those results. So Melissa will say more about that soon. Tutoring at the middle school and intervention at the middle school are happening. I will say, while those things are happening daily, which is a notch up from last year, the thing that is a vacancy right now is we don't have that reading interventionist person in play. And so we had intended to do more interventions in reading with our middle school students. And so that's on hold. So that's just one of the challenges we're kind of working through now until we fill that vacancy. I mentioned honor societies and the induction ceremonies last week. And so we've got 65 students representing NHS or NJHS, which is a new high for Unity. So proud of that. I think we doubled in size at the high school. So excited to work with our 30-something high school students. From a culture standpoint, we are zooming along. I think I wanted to have a reading on kind of how things were going using an external tool last month, and it's just taken us more time to get that together than what we anticipated. So that's still going on, where what we want is a good baseline result of just where things are from a culture perspective at both sites to then build on that. And so that's the status of that. Still pushing, but trying to sort of work through other competing commitments too. From a community service standpoint, which is a representation of school culture, we had a cancer walk with the American Cancer Society. Early in October, about 30 students took part in that across sites. Got some great photos from that I shared in the scoop. Got a food drive going on now with City Harvest. That's through Thanksgiving. And so we're chipping away and doing our part from a community service standpoint as a school, and we'll continue to do that roughly on a monthly basis. Now that we've got NHS up and running, I see more service projects happening with that group of students too. From a family engagement standpoint right now, I'll just tout a couple of things that I think have happened over the past month that I'm proud of. And these are middle school specific here. So we shared state exam results and STAR results with families, so they're aware of kind of where students are, their kids are with regard to like current demonstrated skill in reading, ELA, and math. Our middle school grade level teams held grade level family meetings in November, and that's just kind of a refresher. We're now a month and a half into the year, and let's talk about things at the grade level, at the 8th grade, for example. And so we had about 150 families take part across 3 grades in that. And we haven't done that before. So I think that kind of bodes well for just family engagement and connection and clarity of like what we're trying to do as a school 2 months in. We had our first family ambassador meeting last week at the middle school. 16 families took part in that, and those are meant to be kind of like our ambassadors, like just literally those families that are actively involved in school, act as models for other families, are terrific, are involved, and offer their time and talents to helping us out in ways that are truly helpful. And one of the things they'll be doing is tabling during conferences next week at the middle school and just greeting families as they come in and say, hey, welcome, thank you for being here. This is me, I'm a 7th grade family member, and happy to have you here, and have some coffee before going upstairs to meet with teachers. So that's happening. And then we're collecting some perception data from our families using the tool Panorama, which we've used in the past. And so trying to get a sense of where our families see us and how we might get better at what we do in a few different areas of school. I think I reported that the response rate was low as of last month. It's come up recently because of Chris and Kunlu's efforts. And so I think we'll have a good enough response rate, one that's up on last year, to give us some findings that we can truly act on. So those are some things happening school-wide and continuing. Athletics and enrichment is still strong. Our fall season teams are now kind of working in the playoffs. We've had a number of celebrations for individual students and for team sports. I think there was a big track event today. So feeling spirited about that. Evaluation wise, we're conducting self-assessments right now. I had mentioned last month that I felt a little behind in this area in comparison to where we wanted to be. I think that's still the case, but there's been some good traction over the past week there. So there's been some good sit downs with teammates about kind of where we are now, what the goals for each individual is, what their responsibilities are, how things are going, where there are strengths, where there are weaknesses, what we do moving forward. That's the conversations. Those are the conversations happening now. Grant-wise, still waiting to hear about that big grant we applied for back in September. We have reached out to SED about that, but haven't heard back. And then from a community partnership standpoint, and this is a newer item, there has been some communication with area leaders politically. And so Counselor Ressler visited the high school this past month, got to see our building, got to see our gym with some of the damage done from the flood, got to meet with some of our students, and it was a good showing overall. And we've been in touch since then about some ways in which their office may be helpful to us. And that includes space and having some community space that we can use outside of our school, helping us solidify having a nurse with a DOH, just general good neighbor stuff. So if we have issues with neighbors or things come up, for us to partner with the council member and making sure that our relationships with our neighbors are strong, and then other sorts of things. In addition to that, I also got to meet with Assembly Member Cunningham at Albany during a conference, I guess 3 weeks ago, and working to have him speak at our high school graduation, which would be terrific. He's strong both as a political figure and force, as well as a speaker, and so his message will resonate with kids. Those are the current headlines. I think they just represent who we are as a school overall, and so I think they also represent that it's a busy time of year, but that we're getting stuff done. So a lot going on. Let me pause there and see if there are any reflections from team before moving into the next agenda item for tonight. All right. Well, with that, we'll move into the data dashboard, the third item of the agenda. And I want to share out where we were in September. As you look at this image, you'll see, wow, that current status line is fairly empty. And that's just because we didn't have a lot of data back in September to sort of act on, other than what we were seeing and observing and working on in the moment. In October, here's where we were. So there were some new data points coming in on key facets of school. And here we are now. So we've got kind of a full picture, a quarter in of various elements of school that is important to discuss at the governance level. So we picked off 4 or 5 areas tonight that we're going to dive more deeply on. And then I'll just run through these quickly, so you have a sense of where things are metrically as a school. Talked about enrollment already. It's been steady. We're going to look at pass rates and kind of where things stand. That's a new item for the meeting tonight. We'll also talk about IA results at the middle school. So that's something that we'll dive into. The color codes here represent green, yellow, and red. Green means we're on path or exceeding targets. Yellow means we're around that level, not off path, perhaps just below, but in the game. Or if we're just not kind of like completely certain of having a concrete data point for that, that may indicate yellow. And then pink represents areas where we miss mark and are looking to rebound. With student demographics, we're going to dive more deeply into that. We have some new data on this year's population of students that we have the honor of serving. So we'll look at that from a summary standpoint. Attrition right now, 1% of our students have sort of transitioned out, which is ahead of kind of our goal of 10% of the year. And so we're not going to dive into that, but I'll say we've had a few students leave our school, which is a good thing. Finance-wise, Kristen will have the opportunity to share out where we are there, but the headline is 4 of our 4 metrics are now being met as of the end of October. Student attendance, we're at 91% right now. We'll dig into that tonight, look at that from a few different angles. Out of school suspension, if you remember a month and a half ago, I think we felt like the numbers were a bit high with regard to circumstances at the middle school. There's been some corrections there with regard to just processes, decisions, oversight, et cetera. So that feels good in terms of making sure that we're making good decisions when there are tough choices around a circumstance involving a student, perhaps making a less than favorable decision. So that feels like it's in good form. Now we'll keep an eye on that. Recruitment wise, we'll dig into that next month, but I think right now this is kind of a newer item for us. It's early in the year, so we have 9 applications for the middle school right now. That is up on what we were last year, but the season is just now beginning with us reaching out to some of our feeder schools. And so we'll be looking at that more closely over the coming months. But that's where we are now. So we do have data on that. We are tracking data on that. It's an important element of school. Trustee participation. Thank you for being here tonight. During a Tuesday evening in November, we've had a quorum at each of our meetings thus far. I want to keep it that way. And there are a couple of events coming up, which we'll talk about when we get to the ECPC portion of tonight's meeting. Family participation. I shared out some recent updates, which are good. We also have conferences coming up next week. The mark there is 80% at both sites. We'll see if we get there. Internally, we're looking at 68% on average of families kind of being there. I believe we'll hit that mark. We'll say a bit more about conferences during the data dashboard dive on attendance. And then participation in extracurriculars and rounding out kind of our educational experience. More than half our students right now are taking part in an extracurricular in the afternoon, clubs, athletics, et cetera. So that feels good. That's what we want to offer our kids. And then SPED compliance, we'll do a deep dive on that tonight. I'll share out some of the ins and outs of where we are there as of the fall. So that's the summary of the dashboard to give you a sense of school health a month and a half, 2 months in. Are there any questions there before we dig into 4 or 5 of these items? All right, here we go. So first one relates to student pass rates. I'll orient you to this, and then Melissa will give you the real headline here. So this gives you a sense of, just by grade, our targets for the percentage of students we want passing their courses. And so, for example, in the 6th grade right now, 80% of students are passing their ELA course. So it's on target in green. For students who have IEPs in the 6th grade in ELA, it's 70%. That's a bit below where we want it to be, and that's why it's yellow. Red means we're off that mark and looking to intervene and respond and make change that are good for kids so that they're passing their classes and demonstrating what they ought to be demonstrating learning-wise. So that gives you a sense of things. We've got ELA, math, history, and science, again, for the full school. This is a new dashboard for the board. We do look at this at the SLC level, but this is the first time we've dug into this sort of data full on. I think it's good. It's a good sign. So I think with that, Melissa, tell us what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I think folks who saw this yesterday, this is fresh data, so it's a little bit new for you as well. which is good, and show some shifts across the end of the quarter as we add in some summative assessments. So to pull out some highlights, there are a number of areas where we are performing on target across the school, and then there are some key areas where we are close at a high level, but really need to focus with some specific populations. So ELA across both sites is approaching at a high level, though there's some areas that we are focusing in on, namely our lower school at the high school, who had a rebound at the end of the quarter as we invested students in completing this work, in redoing work that was not mastered. And at the middle school as well, where we see a big focus across grade levels for students with disabilities in ELA. So we have a few responses there. Our 7th and 8th grade had the most impact to staffing in ELA of all of our grade levels across the board, all of our subject areas across the board. So we've done some shifts to put leaders into our 7th grade space, and we've done our most recent hire is for 8th grade ELA and added some support there. We're also launching iReady as of yesterday. That will support with some foundational skill work, which ideally will support students with disabilities who might be having struggles in classes as we have up the rigor of the curriculum this year.
So
And
just
then we have
a quick maybe 2 sentences on iReady for those not familiar with it.
Yeah, iReady is a assessment and learning platform. We chose it specifically because it does a personally designed pathway for each student, and it includes some foundational reading skills, lesson pathways for students who are still developing those. Anything from phonemic awareness, which our kids have tested out of, phonics, vocabulary, as well as comprehension. A lot of what we've supported in the past has been really comprehension focused. So this will give us just a little bit more flexibility in providing kids what they need. And we'll support that population there. And can be used at the high school level as well for some of those 9th graders we see struggling. And then at the high school level, we've invested the team in some more specially designed instruction PD for co-teachers and for our learning specialists, some of whom are earlier in their career as being learning specialists. And we had some principal resets and supports of ELA classes at the high school, how we're addressing there. On the other side of the coin, we're also seeing, if you look at our history and science classes, in many places, really strong grades, though those don't always match the assessments that we're seeing. So we want to make sure that those grades are faithful to the work that students are doing. So we're looking at weekly or semi-weekly work sample audits with principals as one way to lean in there. Our focus has been, especially at the middle school level, in ELA and math, especially given new curriculums and our testing. So that is a ritual that we hope will support some of these areas in being strong indicators of what kids know and can do. Any questions on this high level pass rates dashboard? I lost all your faces. I found them. Okay.
Cool. So I think the idea is to wander in this territory as needed when we feel like there's something important to share out. We haven't done this before, so here we are tonight. We'll do more of it moving forward. And let's move into the next deep dive within the dashboard tonight, which is around demographics. And so here, just to orient you to this, you've seen this table before. What you'll see in this column here is just where we are demographically and looking at our student population for the 23-24 school year in comparison to prior years, 22, 21, and then in comparison to CSD 13, where we reside, our district and location, as well as 16, where the greatest number of our students come from. And then the state too. So you get a sense of, the percentage of students with disabilities, for example, that we serve in comparison to prior years, in comparison to our district of location, our district that we draw from most, and the state. ED represents students who identify as economically disadvantaged, and you'll see where we are at 78% versus where we were in prior years and where we are in comparison to the other districts that we tend to kind of compare to. And then ENL students who are learning, who are new English language learners, and where we stand in comparison to some of these comparison groups. Are there questions there about what you see here? I think the reason this is in green is because our goal is to serve a representative population of students in comparison to our district of location 13. And in looking at those percentages, you see that we do, and in fact, we serve a greater number of students with special needs who identify as economically disadvantaged or who identify as ENL than CSD 13. And so we're honored to do that work, but that's where things look this year. And so the green represents kind of our target being met here. We look at this number, these statistics once a year, at a time when the state kind of looks at demographics across the board. And so these are the findings. Are there questions? What I imagine you'll find also interesting here is in looking at where our students are coming from. While we are located in CSD 13, geographically, that covers downtown Brooklyn, through Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, where I am, to Bed-Stuy, some of Prospect Heights, and 13% of our students are residing within that area. 22% of our students are coming from 16, which is going to be east of Bed-Stuy, and then I think some of Brownsville. And then 17, I'm not even sure what 17 covers. Melissa, do you know? Chris, do you know? In any case, it's 12%. That's our third kind of highest feeder district.
I think it's further in South Brooklyn.
Yeah, cool. So I think the takeaway here is that we don't serve one district solely, and even our district of location, we're only talking about 13% of our students coming from there. So we serve a fairly wide array of students in different areas of Brooklyn, where a majority of our kids are coming from outside of our top 3 feeder districts. Questions here? Exclamation points here.
Josh, just a question. Is this middle school and high school combined? And is there a meaningful difference between the two given the different locations?
Yeah, I love the second question. First question is easy. Yes, it does cover high school too. It's our full population. Second question. Chris or Melissa, you want to field that?
From what I've noticed, it's not meaningfully different. The demographics of our middle school are pretty similar to our high school, both in terms of where our students are coming from and all the subgroups that are represented here.
Yeah. I think agreed. You can be in District 16 from our middle school in about 2 minutes. 17 is a 10-minute walk. So I think that while the entirety of our high school doesn't necessarily feed from our middle school area, our reputation is built in that area. So we still see many students who travel from the same neighborhoods. I think if we looked just at the high school, we would see a larger number of District 14 and 23 students who live in Bushwick. But of the total number of students, it is less impactful.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we've looked at pass rates from our dashboard. We've looked at now demographics from our dashboard. We're going to move into attendance and do a bit of a deeper dive. I think I reported that we had a running daily average attendance of 91% across the school, and that's a good stat to have in hand, but it's also a pretty broad stat. So let's go a bit deeper. What you see here, you see middle school versus high school. At the middle school, attendance is 93% right now, which is right on target with our goal, which is that red line across the center of this visual. So that's good. We're right on target, and that's higher than it's been the last couple of years. I think it hasn't been this high since before COVID. At the high school right now, we are at 89%, so below that 92%, although clawing back and fighting our way. You'll note that within that, 9th and 10th grade have attendance levels that are sub 90 at 89, 88. And so that's our focus right now as we look at kind of where we're seeing the biggest gaps between where we want to be attendance-wise and where we are. Note earlier on, Melissa also brought to you some information on 8th and 9th grade and pass rates. So we might be seeing some connection here. In terms of moves here, I think there's been a number of steps here, particularly at the high school around attendance for this year that have been implemented. One being just a much more explicit formal attendance policy with regard to its connection with course requirements, credit accrual, et cetera. We have a daily advisory happening. We're in that advisory. There is explicit discussion around attendance and the importance of it. We've got student-led conferences happening next week, and a part of that conversation will be a reflection on attendance. Grace, our high school principal, has been attending some trainings recently on kind of climate broadly, but a component of that being like engagement, attendance, et cetera. And so she's bringing that back to team. And so those are some of the things that have happened or are happening that we feel will help the cause and have us closer to that target of 92% on the daily. Let me pause there before doing an even deeper dive on attendance.
Josh, I'll add a not new, but additional action that I just saw in play tonight, closely looking at this data. So each day, for example, at our high school, where we're looking most closely, the attendance is reported. If a student misses, we ask advisors to call. So today, second day of the week, we didn't see the numbers we wanted to see. The principal this evening emailed out teams to remind them to please check and call, because starting a new quarter with strong attendance is so important. So just regularly messaging this, regularly looking at the daily level, looking at attendance data.
All right, deep dive. We're going to look at attendance in a slightly different way now. And this is by tier, where we look at groups of students in different attendance categories. And so we look at the percentage of students that have 90% attendance or more, the percentage of students that have between 80 and 89% attendance, that's in yellow, and then the percentage of students that have below 80%, that have really chronically concerning attendance rates. And so in this first table for the middle school, just to orient you to it, this first bar represents the ideal. That's our target. We want 85% of our students attending school 90% of the time or above. We want no more than 10% of our students with an average attendance of 89 down to 80% daily attendance. And then we want no more than 5%, a small percentage of our students with chronic absenteeism concerns. And the idea here is we've equipped ourselves as a school and staffed ourselves as a school to work with students of these distributions. And if those are out of whack, we may not have a match with regard to the services or interventions we have in play with the needs of students. And so this is what we kind of act on. As you look at the middle school and the combination of colors here, you'll note that at the middle school, we're not quite there to where we want to be, but we're not far off either. And I think this is a stronger year than certainly we've seen in the last several years here. The sixth grade is very close to like our targeted distribution of attendance levels. That is often the case. As you think about kids being younger, families playing a very strong role in like kids coming to school, departing from school, et cetera. And then as you get older, some of that goes away and may adversely infringe on high attendance. At the high school right now, you're seeing some of the same pattern. When we look at 9th and 10th grade, where we're starting to zoom in, we see that 35% of our students have attendance levels on the daily in the 9th grade that are below 90%. And so that's a concern. with 16% of our kids, I'm sorry, 19% of our kids, just shy of a fifth of our kids having attendance that is lower than 80. So this is concerning. This is a red flag right now. And when we look at this versus other cohorts. And the 10th grade is not far behind. In the 11th and 12th grade, we're seeing stronger attendance levels with room for improvement. But that's sort of some of the story. We talked about some of the interventions at play already. Maybe the one that I'd add to the mix that we are doing is we are staffed with a heavy academic counseling and social work team at both sites. And so those folks are charged with providing supports, interventions for kids who are chronically absent. And so a form of that is during conferences next week, they will be pushing into family conferences and meetings to offer support, provide perhaps a wealthier array of interventions at play where kids that need greater support will receive it. And so that's our approach. That's how we operate when it comes to chronic absenteeism and countering it. So let me pause there. Are there any questions or insights, ideas around what you're seeing here attendance-wise by tier? We're bringing a whole host of data to y'all tonight, so I hope you're finding it as intriguing as we do in looking at this for the first time when it's hot off the press. All right, I'm going to move into the last deep dive on the dashboard tonight, and that relates to SPED compliance. You've seen this, returners or folks who've been here a while have seen this table before on prior dashboards. And so our targets are here in blue. And so essentially there are three categories, and they're very broad. This is a very broad kind of measure of compliance and special education at the school, but it's tended to work as we need it to in looking at it periodically. So we look at the percentage of students that have IEPs up to date. And so that's just a general measure of like, are kids and their needs being cared for, particularly kids with special needs, as frequently as they should, such that their IEPs, their programs are up to date. At both sites, we're at 94% and 86%. Our target is 90% just because there tends to be some fluctuation with IEP meetings happening. There being a process to finalize, and then once they're finalized, then they're up to date. This 86% represents just a bit of that, where we have everything and we need to. The CSE, the group that finalizes IEPs, just now has them and they're finalizing them, which they have 10 days to do. So we expect this number to jump to 99% within the coming week. So things are in form here. IEPs are up to date. The other measure we look at is just the degree to which IEPs are being fully met, partially met, or not currently met. And that has to do often with the sort of programming we offer as a school versus what's on IEP, where often they don't fully square. So you'll note that this is a low number for fully met for the middle school, where 30% of students have IEPs that are being fully met, and 60% have IEPs that are being partially met. So the reason for that is that right now there is a shortage with the DOE in offering speech and occupational therapy. Like there just isn't someone, as there's been in the past, to provide that service and come into our school and work with our kids. And that's just not a unit. It's not just a Unity issue. It's an issue across schools. They're just shortages. So that's not good for kids. One of the ways in which we're working through that right now is by offering vouchers through the DOE for families to then go and get those services independently on their own. That's not a great fix. That just puts the burden on families, but it's better than nothing. But that's currently what's going on. And we're exploring a few other ways of countering this in communication with the DOE. So that's just where things stand right now. And we'll keep an eye on it, but that's the reason for this. If speech and occupational therapy were being provided by the DOE to our students, these numbers would be in the green. And so that gives you a sense of kind of where things are now. We monitor this, we look at it, we ask good questions, we often come up with solutions if need be. And right now we're kind of in the solution land of figuring this out, where we've got a short-term fix, but it's not a good enough fix. And so that's the latest. Questions there, insights there, ideas there? All right, so there's that summary again. We went through 5 or 6 kind of areas of school that I deemed as noteworthy tonight. We'll do the same in the coming month, where we may look at a few other kind of areas of school, depending on what is most impactful. And from there, we'll move into committee reports. And so with that, we're going to begin with the SLC. We met yesterday and we talked about headlines already. That should say 45. We're now going to dig into middle school state exam results. Actually, this looks a little bit outdated, but it's okay. We're going to talk about IA results today and what we're doing in response to them. And so I think with that, I'm going to hand things over to Melissa.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to go through just middle school IA results, zooming into math and ELA specifically. Biggest headlines are that IA results in ELA and math are promising and they have an upward trajectory, where we keep in mind how students are doing on STAR, how students did last year, and how students are doing as compared to students last year. Fall STAR results, we'll look at those a little bit, are significantly lower than the proficiency rates projected for ELA and math results in most cases, and show some year over year bright spots, or are still an area for growth. Folks can let us know if our analysis is sound, if there's other pieces that are missing, and if there are some of the strategy that we're taking, there are recommendations as well. So here we have, I'll do like some very brief orienting, then give some high level information here. Our middle school IA1, ELA, and STAR reading results are here below. We're showing them to you much as we look at them together. We have this chart by grade level, and then following that is this cohort's pass rates last year. So proficiency rates, what percentage of students were proficient in this cohort last year. Then we have last year's 6th graders, for example, up at the top, STAR scores, next to this year's 6th grader STAR scores. Last year's 6th graders IA1 scores, next to this year's 6th graders IA1 scores, and then our minimum exam target. So that 2023 state exam comparison follows the cohorts. The rest of the stuff compares a 6th grader last year to a 6th grader this year, for example. This test design was designed using released state exam questions. So it is an end of year style test given to kiddos, but should help us track how they are progressing throughout the year. A little bit about this team. Our ELA chair is in her 2nd year at Unity, but the vast majority of ELA teachers are new or not here yet. We have some vacancies, and we're using a new curriculum in Wit and Wisdom. So this is what we're bringing into this work here. All that being said, we are happy that across all 3 grade levels, our ELA results are much higher. Our proficiency rates are much higher than our 2022 proficiency rates at this time last year. We are watching our 7th grade specifically, while our 6th grade is close to our end of year exam target and growing from last year. 33% of our 7th graders were proficient in 6th grade on the ELA exam, and only 28% are currently projected to be proficient if they took that exam today. And we have a much higher target when we set our goals against District 13. I'll talk about the response to this in just a moment, though we are still excited about that increase year over year. Mm-hmm. Josh, you want to go to the next screen? It has the same data on it.
Yep.
So questions on the data before I talk about a couple of responses.
Same data, next steps
are here. Josh has already talked about how our team had some time to do some data action planning. Our middle school team especially really looked at groupings of students, as well as opportunities to reteach distinct skills and reassess. We have set individual goals for students. We have a tracker. It identifies which students we anticipate will be able to move into proficiency across the year. And then in addition to these larger checks for understanding, we have smaller checks for understanding quizzes where we'll be tracking that proficiency, and we've planned some of those out. We have also that seventh grade that is lagging where we wish them to be a little bit. We have intensified the supports in those rooms with one of our department chairs pushing into one of our seventh grade classes that had a co-teaching gap, as well as our principal flexing in when that can't be a reality. Soon we are hopeful that a teacher will be returning from leave and will relieve some of the stress of those vacancies that we see resulting here. In addition, we kicked off iReady, which is that personalized instruction. We have those tutoring blocks. So some of the reasons we think that the IA results might look different year over year is a strong curriculum that we're using across vertically, our grade levels. And we have a tutoring block, but this will allow students, rather than doing like one general assignment, if we are not responding to them in a small group, if they were not the ones chosen for that small group work, to be working on something individually related to their specific needs. Any questions on either the data or the responses here? Thematically similar process with math too. So data cut the same way. Here we're looking at our sixth graders. If you remember back to when we were looking at grade level data, that was also one of the areas students were struggling a little bit more at the middle school in sixth grade math. And for our students with disabilities, still striving there. So supports there. We have a strong team, and we're still seeing that IA score doubled over last year. We are strongly on track with our seventh graders. And then our eighth grade number would look alarming here, but it is up over last year. Also, we're tracking things a little bit differently here. Last year, and our prior framework, all eighth graders had to take the eighth grade exam. Right now, if you're taking a high school level class, the high school level exam is sufficient. So we have about a third of our kids taking Algebra 1. All of those students scored at that proficiency bar for IA1 in algebra. We are hoping to push them into that college ready bar. So we would be closer to that 56% for them. Math, similar set of responses. One thing we're thinking about here is that we have this new curriculum in Eureka Math. This assessment was a little bit more connected to our new curriculum. We think that it is more rigorous than the New York State math exam, the style of questions. But we're thinking as we assess, you can go to the next page, Josh, across the next few weeks as we do our weekly or bi-monthly checks for understanding and quizzes that we track, about balancing both curriculum items that are provided for us so that we can make sure we're strongly aligning our assessment to that, and enfolding in some like recycled math state exam questions into our checks for understanding, and looking at those for alongside those individualized goals for kiddos. And then similarly, students have tutoring. iReady is in effect. It's actually Thursday and Friday. Students will begin that for math. They started for ELA. And we also have some intervention for kiddos that is in place for math, as we do have that role filled. Questions on either our data or on our responses?
Can we talk about STAR for a quick moment?
Quick moment, yeah. You've seen some of this alluded to in the slides above, but these are our fall STAR results by grade level using grade level equivalency. Biggest takeaways are, while we see upward trajectory here, we are not seeing the growth year over year that we would want to be seeing. Students are growing less than one grade level in any given year, and we want to see students growing more than one grade level, given that on average they come in about a grade level behind, and several grade levels behind at our high school level. So while there's growth over time, it's not sufficient for what we want to be seeing. But or additionally,
Oh,
next
man,
slide.
again, sorry.
Yeah, I really
A little
thought, I
better.
thought
A
after
little better
yesterday,
here.
you were doing great, Josh. What we are seeing, what you see here, the blue bars represent our percentile ranking in fall 2023 this year. The red bars represent our percentile ranking in fall of 2022. So that is relative to other children who take this exam. And across the board, our percentile rankings are up this year. Not where they want them to be yet, but this is a strong indicator of positive growth over time. And we're hoping that if we continue this trajectory, we'll also see that grade level equivalency increasing as well. Winter assessment will be in January for our students, January to very early February, depending on grade level band, and we're hoping to see that upward trajectory continue. Questions here?
And so that rounds out the SLC kind of debrief for what we wanted to bring the board from that meeting. Any questions before we move on to AFC updates? All right, so let's do that. You're looking at the agenda from last Friday's SLC call. We're going to dive into the first item today. The others, we'll look at other points in time, but yeah, let's dive into the first update, which would be October 2023. And so, Kristen, to you.
All right, thanks, Josh.
Mhm.
So we are reporting out our results for October 31st, 2023. As was stated earlier this evening, when we're looking at the NICEAD benchmarks, we are now meeting all 4 of those benchmarks. We are in a positive position as of October 31st. We are positive position for working capital and debt to assets, which we were last month as well. And our cash position is well above the 60 days right now. We did receive our November per pupil payment at the end of October, which helped us to get to that metric. And then for year end, we are projecting still to be in an even greater positive position than we are right now. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about that.
Mhm.
Bond covenants. Just a reminder, I've said it a couple times now, when our cash position is 60 days for Unity, we automatically match the bond covenant that we have of 60 days. The bond covenant includes Unity and FONB, and we are meeting that for Unity, so we are meeting that for Unity and FONB automatically, but even greater when we include in the FONB cash. And then looking at our debt service coverage ratio, we are also in a positive position. We're at 1.4 when we need to be at least at 1.1 from the bond covenant requirements. And we are projecting for both of those that as of June 30th, we will also be meeting both of those metrics. We talked a little bit about enrollment already this evening. Just a reminder, in the budget for June, we had 533 students, and then we had 113 special ed students. And our actuals are higher than that, which is giving us a positive variance on our special ed and regular ed students, general education students. Any questions on the metrics, on the benchmarks? Nope. Okay. Moving on, balance sheet, no major changes from last month, so we'll just kind of bypass that. Revenues and expenses on a year-to-date perspective, comparing last year to this year's year-to-date. No major variances beyond the lease assistance to discuss tonight. Just a reminder, we had a delay in our lease assistance applications. We have received our lease assistance in our November payment for a portion of our rent, which is specifically the building rent. The lot rent, the trailer rent will come in the next payment. But we will start seeing some revenue here, which is great. And knowing that that revenue is missing, even with that missing revenue, we are in a positive position. So once that revenue starts being recognized, we're going to be in an even greater positive position. So we'll continue to monitor our expenditures and keeping an eye on that, making sure we're staying in alignment with the budget current as of June, and then also any updates, which we'll get into in another month. Any questions on the year to date? Okay. Moving on, when we talk about the broader year to date or the year end projections, we're not going to get into too much detail here because at this point in the year, we are still projecting to come in alignment. There's no major variances to report at this time. And then our cash flow projection, as I had stated at the beginning here, we did receive our PPA payment at the end of October, so that's pushed us up to over $4 million. We are projected to be in pretty good shape for the next few months. We still have a concern with June of reaching that 60 days. So we'll have deeper discussions in the spring if that trend continues. And that is it for October. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yep.
Okay, so moving into the next committee report out is the DFC, Development and Facilities. And so what we're going to discuss and bring to the full board tonight, you see the agenda, the full agenda from that call, which was last Wednesday. We're going to talk about fundraising initiatives, but do that during the strategic planning portion of the meeting. I will provide some updates on facilities, namely some of the work that was done in the gym in response to the flood damage that we incurred early October, late September. So I think there, what you see here fundraising wise are just some of the initiatives that, again, we'll talk about a bit later in tonight's meeting. But we did go into depth on these a month ago and then came back to them more briefly last week. I already reported out on grants, no word on the state grant. That's for just under $900,000. So we're hoping for good news soon there. And we did not receive the alumni support grant through the CUNY Grad Center that we had applied for, although there is a meeting with our manager of alumni support and CUNY to get some feedback on that grant so we can perhaps apply to some other foundations for funding in this area. Donations wise, over the past 30 days, pretty quiet. No donations in, but the next 30 days, typically the end of the year, tend to be a bit more busy. And so a couple of headlines with regard to development donations, both for our wider network and for this board. A donation letter will go out to supporters in early December. We're not ready yet to launch kind of a full campaign with building related stuff, but we will be doing so in the coming years. So that won't be a part of this. But I do want to get something out to supporters as we've done each year to give them the opportunity to give to school at year end. In addition, for this board, all board members are expected to make a donation to the school by, I'm putting a date down at 12/15 just to sort of make it concrete. And that's for those folks that perhaps haven't made a donation thus far in 2023. As we've always said, there's no donation minimum amount. Members should give what they feel comfortable giving. What is important, however, is that we do have 100% giving so that we can get out and say that when we make a case to outside supporters and seek donations from them. So I will send an email to all members of the board kind of privately in the coming week or so with directions on giving. Jim or Sal, any additional tidbits here? All right, moving things forward. Some pictures, some photos, some good ones. So this is our gym. This is our gym after the flood. in which it was being demolished, and all of the materials, the wood floor being removed from the gym upstairs to 4 or 5 dumpsters, which took up a good portion of Williamsburg over the course of a weekend. Made that happen though. And then from there was some cleaning going on and a fresh coat of cement, a thin layer put down on the gym floor. And that's what it looked like as of today. This picture was actually taken last week, but I had a meeting in a circle at mid-court today with about 30 kids, and that's where we were. And it worked out. It was fine. So no wood floor, so we can't like do sports in the same kind of way in the gym. So we are renting a space nearby, but this is the latest with regard to how we're responding to like this unfortunate occurrence. In addition to that, just some more details. So we removed the floor, had this temporary flooring down. It did have some disruptive effects on the school, and so it wasn't something which was just something we could do and didn't cause any disruption. So we worked through it, but it's been hard. And so I just want to kind of thank our team for doing all they can to smoothen things out and cause the least amount of disruption possible. We're working with the insurance company now to get things taken care of and the full cost of the repair covered. And we're looking at the possibility of installing a new permanent floor over the December break. And so if that happens, that'd be great. But if it doesn't, we're in good hands in the short term with regard to this space and what we need it for at this point in time. Are there any questions about facility matters, particularly at the high school? Okay, here's another peek at what we're dreaming of, the after picture of our building over time and before. I guess what we'll do now is move on to ECPC updates, all things enrichment and community partnership. So all we're going to do tonight and bringing something to the full board is talk about one specific goal, and that relates to board connection with school. So the goal here, as established by the ECPC, is that 100% of board members will engage in at least one school-based event or activity this year to interact with staff, make connections with staff, with students, with families. And so what you have here are 9 different events over the course of this year, which are meaningful to school. We've got dates down and times down, not on this slide, but on the survey you have in hand. In the email I sent out on Monday, there is a survey link which just says, hey, which of these events can you take part in? Which of these events would you be jazzed to go to and be present, interact, cheerlead, see our kids in action, celebrate, all of those good things. And so the ask here is that all members identify at least one event that you can take part in and engage in this year. I ask that you complete the survey by mid-December, so that's a month away, so you have plenty of time. Most of these events, with the exception of the middle school walkthrough on the 11th of January, are happening several months down the road, 2 months down the road, so you have plenty of time. And again, in the survey, it provides the approximate times of each of these events. So Sal's taken the lead. He signed up for middle school graduation on the 26th of June, as well as an art exhibition on the 10th of May. So with that, any questions here on the ask? Sal, anything to share?
Nothing. I think you nailed it. Let's just be accountable, make sure we make it to an event. Let Josh know which one you want to make it to.
And here we are. Items for approval tonight. Jim, I believe we only have the minutes that are coming up for approval this evening.
Did we want to do that, the issue with the cash management?
No, I think we're going to bring that forward next month. I think there's probably a little more to discuss before we go live with it.
Okay. Okay, so the item up for approval is the minutes from the prior meeting. Does anybody have any questions, comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, approving the minutes? Hands. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now moving into the area of strategic planning, and this is in a slightly different order than the way in which we've done things before, but I thought we'd give it a whirl and see how it goes. So I want to talk about development tonight, and do some planning around that specific area. I'm going to talk about our need as I see it, and then some of the ways in which we're filling that need from a strategic standpoint. And so the question for you all tonight is the following. Do the proposals hold promise for addressing the need that I'm now going to share out? And if not, what changes or upgrades would you make to the plan? And then where would the plan that I put forward tonight in very 1.0 form, where is it most susceptible to perhaps coming up short, and how do we address that threat proactively? So those are the two key questions I'd like you to have in mind as I share out. First, the need. And this comes out of some discussion with the DFC back in September, a little bit more in October, and now I think it's ready to kind of come to the full board. So we have a need of about $2.5 million across 3 areas of school that, if filled, would mean really great things for school in the near term and over the next couple of years. So the needs are threefold. First, with regard to 23-24 programming, there are a few very concrete needs. One is $100K for alumni success and be able to kind of continue to carry that program out, where kids, once graduating from Unity, have some additional support that lends to greater completion and persistence among kids in college, and then in career too, in sort of finding their footing and getting into a stable sort of like standing with career ambitions. In addition to that, we've got $100,000 just in the budget for general annual fundraising, which we've typically met through just annual giving in the past. And then we've got 50,000 kind of programming or small campaigns, things like exposure trips to colleges, funding kind of our debate team, other extracurriculars, et cetera. And so those are kind of in the budget right now as things we're raising for this year. In addition to that annual need, there's a need about $2 million, and that's a very tentative number with regard to the renovation and expansion of our high school building. And so we'll talk a bit more about what that looks like and what the expansion looks like, both in this meeting and in future meetings. But I just would note that the expansion would result in us being able to serve more students. And that's great because more kids then experience what we're offering. And then I think for us, because of the way in which things are structured, we'd be able to sort of put more funding to individual students and do so through both having more students and seats and being able to allocate that resources back to our student population. So, and that's without kind of incurring significant additional costs. So there's some economies of scale there. In addition to the third give, the third ask or need is really about kind of like remediation academically. And so one of the best research-based approaches to that, which is not cheap, is kind of high dosage tutoring. And I see some promise in doing that in partnership with a local entity, maybe a college or a university, and having that be a kind of pipeline and connection for the school. So those are 3 very real needs that would serve the school well in the short term and over the coming few years, and certainly serve our kids well beyond that. So questions again, do the proposals I put forth, I'm going to put 2 forth tonight, make sense, and how could they be changed or upgraded in meeting the needs that we have, and then where could things go wrong, and what do we do about it? So there are 4 proposed initiatives that I've discussed with the DFC in prior meetings. I'm going to bring 2, the most worthy to the stage tonight. One relates to naming rights of select spaces and initiatives within the school. And then the second relates to the creation of a Friends of Unity Advisory Council. So I think with the naming rights initiative, here's sort of the pitch. I'm going to give it to you as it's baked now, knowing that it needs further work. But it's in a pretty good place to kind of offer a form and a vision for what it would look like. So here it is. And some of this, I'm thinking back to Marion back in August or September when we began thinking about the expansion of the building and what that might look like and how we then present it. And so I think the presentation is something around, we're just really excited to share that we purchased our new high school facility in the heart of Williamsburg. And with the ability to make this space our home, we're calling on the support and partnership of those who have appreciated our cause in the past and support our cause moving forward. So I specifically here, the campaign that we would be launching would do the following. It would allow for us to upgrade one of our classrooms to a full functioning art studio, which we don't have right now. It would add a community and performing arts space. So imagine a space that can seat close to 100 people. We probably have a lunch there as well, but it would be a multi-purpose space for things that we currently can't do, and things are also happening in the gym concurrently. We add at least 4 new classrooms to the mix. Our architects are kind of working on some of that preliminary work now, and this would increase the capacity of us to serve more students. And then we would fully renovate our gym for athletics, physical education, and wellness. And then we would add a rooftop. This is the nice to have, but I think it has some appeal. We'd add a botanic garden on our roof and a science lab for the study of life sciences. So as a part of the campaign, we would be offering opportunities for individuals or organizations to honor others through naming rights for specific settings within the building, as well as initiatives that we have happening. We've done some research on naming rights and what it looks like, and it's interesting, and I think it is promising. So essentially, these are like multi-year, perhaps a 15-year partnership with those who are giving, and then having the space or initiative commemorated on someone or something's behalf. Those be payable in a few different forms, but it would be then highlighted prominently within that space or initiative to recognize and celebrate those that it's being named after. There would be a ribbon cutting ceremony, some kind of celebration. There'd be prominent signage, and then there'd be regular communication on how the contribution is impacting our school, our students, and community. And so that's generally how this would work. In terms of the opportunities and the numbers that would be associated with them, here are the ideas. Again, this is just a brainstorm as of now, and there's been some research on what's appropriate given funding. This seems to be fitting. So in terms of the building, in naming the building after something or someone, that might be $500,000 over a 15-year partnership. The gym might be $200,000. The community art space might be 100, and you get the idea as you look further down the screen on kind of what is being presented here. We could name our classrooms for an entity or an individual at some amount. As you all know, we have designations of teachers at different levels that we could also name as colleges do, as a way of bringing resources to the school. And then there are initiatives, our mentoring program, our debate program, different summer enrichment programs. Those could all be named after something or someone who believes in those specific causes. And so that would also be a source of funding for the school. Adding these all up, this might be north of $1 million and more. And so that offers some appeal if we are able to connect with the right people who resonate with some of the things we do at the school, as well as some of the spaces or initiatives that we'd love to put forward within this opportunity. Are there questions before I move into maybe just some possible next steps and get some feedback there?
Where does the 15-year come from, Josh?
Yeah, I think
This came from one exemplar that I was familiar with in Indiana that I read up on, and they do it actually in 12-year increments.
Is that a school?
I've seen 20. It's sort of like an FOMB for a district in Indianapolis. So same general realm of field. But I think if it ended up being something more or less, there's some more research that have to be done. I'd want to consult with some more folks in doing so. But generally speaking, what I've found right now is that seems to be about what the duration of time is. Does that strike you as off in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I thought when people named a break or whatever, it was just on there and it just wasn't for a specific period. I know naming rights for stadiums and stuff are for specified periods, but I don't know. I think if you're going to engrave the plaque in front of a classroom, you're not telling people you're going to take it off soon. But I don't know. I'm not. This is kind of a more of a gut reaction than knowing how these things are done. But you know, I don't know if like the Metropolitan Opera takes the names off the seats after a while. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Anyone else kind of know that?
Typically, but not for profit, depending on the price level, that name is in perpetuity. You don't rotate it. But you know, that's not to say that you can't set the trend, but typically that's the baseline how it works.
Thanks, Lenny. Any other questions or ideas as you know, this is a possible path for us?
And this is really an annoying one, but before you start thinking about putting stuff on the roof, please talk to your insurance company, because if it's going to cost an enormous amount of money to insure, you may not want to do it.
Yeah. I think, you know, look, we all know it. We all know that it's important to prioritize, and we have specific kind of like priority needs at the school. I see some promise in that initiative, but you know, it might not be the most essential one. So I think that would have to come from kind of outside funding to make happen. But yes, I think if we move forward with that, which would be terrific, making sure that we've done all of our diligence up front makes sense. Any other questions? I mean, is this a crazy notion in your mind?
No, it's not crazy to me. I think obviously it needs to be refined. I think people like to put names on buildings or classrooms or whatever. You know, in the sort of more or less disadvantaged schools, you also have like graduating classes who get together to like, so, you know, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice the groups and like who gets honored and whatever. But I mean, I'm sort of agreeing with Lenny that I think people expect that their name would just stay on there in a situation like this, but I don't know. It's worth doing a little more research.
Yeah. And I think if that were the case, let's say this is more of a permanent partnership, it's still well worth doing. It just might change up what we do 10 years from now or 15 years from now. But certainly would still benefit school mission kids.
Yeah, and I think people expect that it's a meaningful amount of money that warrants, you know, staying there for a while. But yeah, I don't think you should expect to be able to recycle the various spaces.
So in terms of like kind of moving forward with this and getting into more detail with it, here are some of the steps that are now being eyed. One is just obtaining some renderings or some visuals of the specific spaces mentioned, and perhaps some of the initiatives that I've outlined. Two would be creating a series of kind of one-pagers for each setting. Like, okay, what's this about? Why is this meaningful? Why should this be important to you? Why might you find this specific initiative or setting special? Third would be kind of creating a space for this on our website. And we've got a couple of models for that right now. But that'd be where it'd be housed.
And then fourth would be, where we get into the kind of roll up the sleeves work, which is like creating kind of a potential donor list where like there's some bigger asks here. And so we may have to reach 2 or 3 dimensions out of our immediate network to create the right connection with the right people who this resonates with, who have the means to
Can I
perhaps
ask a
chip in.
question, Josh?
Yeah.
Like a few minutes ago, you said we weren't ready to start a campaign,
Mhm.
and this seems like one. So were you saying we just can't do it this year, but we're going to start next year? Or are you thinking there's multiple phases to this? Or how?
Yeah, no, just technically, I was thinking about like the coming 20 days and doing something
Okay,
before
okay,
end of
got
the
it.
year in December versus the next 6 months. And then the fifth step would be like, meeting with those donors, and so in terms of the timing here, that's happening in January, kind of April. And this again is a rough timeline. Things often take a bit longer than what my mind initially puts forward. But I think this is a draft path at a series of steps in the coming months.
So I think people expect kind of Giving Tuesday, right? They expect year end, and to a lesser extent, they expect June 30 because a bunch of nonprofits have, June-ish because a bunch of nonprofits have sort of mid-year
Mhm.
year ends,
Mhm.
and in a lot of schools, as you know.
Mhm.
So I think I would try to go with the pack and try to target, mention like this is the school's fiscal year or FONB's, whatever.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, I'm not sure people are ready to cut checks in April when they're paying their taxes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear is this might be more of a January, June thing. And then like, look, a lot of this is just
Yeah, I mean,
like,
you can meet with them at any time. It's just the point where
yeah.
you make the ask has got to be like, when people, I don't know. I mean, I feel like most of these calls are in December and June.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess depending on the relationship, that makes sense. And I mean, I could see an initial conversation with someone with this sort of means happening in April, May as an initial outreach, and then finally getting their attention in the summer when there's some time off and people are sitting back and saying, okay, what am I doing next? What would be exciting?
And it's perfectly fine to spend time with them over the summer and then check in October and make
Yeah.
your formal ask in November, right? So I think that's all fine. I'm just telling you what my sense is of the atmospherics out there and when people start pressing hard for money.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to consider too is for this to be successful, well, let me say it this way: for the success that we anticipate that will happen, you got to take a different approach in the sense that some of this will be a cultivation of individuals, particularly for your larger ask. But then it's nothing wrong with getting a group of people in a room together, having them understand a vision and what the ask is, and making them aware of different levels of contribution so that you can get everyone together in one shot, whether that's just a simple cocktail in a gym, if that's a way to get people to a park. But there's going to be multiple ways for you to have success with this. And so you should think broadly, and you should think about what benefits come to a different tier. Someone who's giving you, $10 million, throwing out there a high number, is going to be cultivated and engaged differently than someone who's giving 1,000. Each of those contributions are valuable and mean the same to the school.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. So I think with that, I'm going to move into the second initiative and then talk a bit about the how in terms of help. So the second initiative is the creation of a Unity Advisory Council. Here's the kind of like vision or purpose of it, as you see in the screen. So this would be a council that supports the school. Picture, young professionals, maybe 25 to begin with, perhaps 50 as we really get cruising along, and who knows beyond that. But the idea is that this group of people, and not just young professionals, it could be just professionals who are
eager to kind of commit something to a school, do something good in service, and do so in a way that perhaps isn't as intensive or as coveted as being a tremendous board member. And so here, this is about us achieving kind of like our short-term and long-term goals as a school in alignment with our mission, and the support takes the form of members contributing their time, their expertise, their resources to the school over a given year. So it's like an annual membership kind of thing. And again, it'd be limited in terms of demands to then have perhaps more people be committed to it and not feel as if their time isn't there. So specifically, it looks something like this. And I spoke with Sal and Jim about this, and we had, we toyed with a few ideas here and there. So Jim, I've kind of incorporated, and Sal incorporated what you've said. It may not be exactly what you've said, but I think it kind of gets at where I think this lands in an ideal form. And so we want to be kind of aware of people's time. We also want people to be able to engage meaningfully and authentically in the school in some way. And so the ask would be you engage in 1 to 2 events over the course of the year. And these aren't like big asks. It might be taking part in our career day on a Wednesday afternoon for 2 hours, or just attending and cheerleading during our college signing day, or perhaps taking part in a community service day that we have already set up. Just show up, put the gloves on, and let's clean up the park. Those sorts of things. There'd be an ask or donation or due of $500 annually to the school. We played with different amounts. At 200, is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? I think given where we are as a school and who we are as a community-based school, 500 is probably a sweet spot. It might be a bit north of what I thought originally, but I think some of the feedback I received here is that it should be higher. And so that's what this represents. And that money would go to funding different programs within the school, tutoring, summer enrichment, that kind of thing. In terms of how it looks in sharing expertise, that'd be the third bit that would be committed as an ask here. And so let's say you've got someone who owns a bookstore in the area, and they're on this council. They might, maybe give kids a discount on books. Maybe that's something they offer, or perhaps they do a reading on a given night and open up the bookstore for our kids to read some work that they've created, that kind of thing. If someone works in consulting, management-wise, maybe they're just kind of reading up on a strategic plan that we have and offering some feedback on that, or some resources, or helping us create a deck for it, whatever it is. But those sorts of things. So I think the asks aren't that big, and it'd be within one's wheelhouse to sort of commit to it. So that's what it might look like in terms of what the school receives. I know the font is small here, so I'll take you through this. But in terms of what the benefits are to the school, we'd have some additional expertise to draw from, a bigger kind of base or expanded network funding. And then we'd have kind of additional presence and connection during events such as Career Day. Beyond kind of the near-term benefits, I think there's like a board pipeline potentially here. There are perhaps internship opportunities for kids, if that's something one could commit to. Mentoring, tutoring, I opened with that tonight. I think that's strong within kind of like the connection between what this could be and what it could mean for general mentoring of kids. And then in terms of what the school would need to do, I think it's important to be honest about what we could commit to and what it might look like for the school, so it's not too big and people aren't feeling neglected. We would include the names and pictures of council members on our website with a short bio. We manage kind of event participation and communication in-house. There'd be some regular kind of correspondence from school leadership, perhaps like a biannual report or something like that. An annual thank you letter from students. Get some gear, maybe some hats to people, something like that. And then they'd be a part of like our weekly mailing with the scoop to just get a sense of what's going on at the school this week. Let me take a break from my computer on Friday afternoon and soak it in. So those are things that I think we would commit to in making the relationship strong and long lasting. So that's the vision. Let me pause there and see what sorts of feedback people have. Is this intriguing?
So I have a question. What are we hoping to fulfill with this that would not be fulfilled by having people be members of the advisory board or the FONB board? given that we're looking for people to go to the FONB board, and it doesn't seem that the advisory board is being particularly active at the moment, and I think it's sort of targeting the same population. So are we just creating more things for the same group of people?
Yeah, so I think with FOMB, there's a finite number of people who can join that board, and I think that's a different group. That might come from a shown demonstration of investment in the school to then join that board. But I think there'd have to be something offered there to join the FOMB board in my mind. And again, we might be able to get 5 members at the most, and that'd still be kind of a big board for FOMB. So it's different. With regard to the
why? Right? I mean, the FONB board doesn't do that much, Josh, right? So it could be kind of ceremonial. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. I mean, you probably have a couple, like a meeting a quarter and maybe cutting a larger check than 500, but like there's a subset of that population that might be good for FONB, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely a subgroup. Go ahead, Sal.
Just gonna say, I think part of the conversation, Marianne, was just to kind of have like a farm team of folks that are kind of passively interested. They know about the school, or maybe the people in our network. I mean, that's kind of how it might begin. But you know, in an ideal scenario, it's 15, 20, 30 people, 50 people even. And it's just kind of like I said, a farm team of folks that we can keep kind of involved in some way where they feel like they're part of an organization. Perhaps some people are doing it for a resume builder, but they may still have somewhat of an interest in education and Unity Prep specifically. Like Josh said, if we wanted to tap into their particular expertise, we have that option, although I don't think that is a pressure that we would put on those folks. And then they would have a bit of ownership and because they are paying annually or whatever it is, or maybe attending some events, getting updates from us or Josh or whatever. They feel like they're part of the organization, and perhaps in the future they step that up and end up on one of the 2 bigger boards. But I think it's part of the bigger picture of just like trying where can we get ultimately to help fundraising, I think is really the big thing here. School awareness, etc.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I worry about confusing the messaging with the associate board, but I don't know. I mean, you guys are more expert at this than I am.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in my mind, the associate board is unofficially dissolved. It isn't operating right now.
All right, so this is a replacement. Okay.
It is, yeah, and I think it's in my mind is a learning experience. I think what was hard in our initial years is we grew out that associate board really fast because we had some energy to do so. But I think we were unable to. I know that I wasn't able to give it the time that I think it deserved, and I think it needed, and I think it sort of like people wanted. And so it was a second board when we were still trying to get things off the ground with this board, and it became more effort. And because it was an associate board, there was a formality to it that required time and attention. And I just think this would provide some of the benefits of an associate board. It could potentially offer more, and that you've got more people in the network coming in without the sort of effort or need to kind of like give it attention on a monthly basis, which is what it was several years ago when it was active.
Okay, but still, this is going to need to be sustained, right? Like it's going to need to take attention to get the people on and to get them into whatever, right? Is it really going to require less time, I guess, would be my question.
It'll require less of my time, and I've got more of a team that can do this work, and there are systems, I think, in thinking about the responsibilities of the school. I can delegate this out or get people to do this that isn't myself or Hemant several years ago, which took away from the day job. So I think there is some work to do in building this up, and it needs to be worth it. But if we've got 25 to 50 people, my sense is this:
in fast forwarding to the question of where could this come up short, where could the naming rights thing come up short, I think it's in the past, we haven't demonstrated governance-wise or school-wise that we've got the networks needed to raise the sort of funding that we might desire. And so we come up short on the list. We need a bigger pipeline of potential people, and then those people that have a pipeline of potential people. And so I think we're just expanding kind of our interest base, which I think is what we need, and would proactively get around what I think might be the barrier we face some months from now if we don't have something like this in effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're gonna need to put somebody on your team in charge of coordinating, probably.
Mhm.
If you want this to work, because if it's nobody's responsibility, I just worry that if it becomes more work than it seems, to be bringing in terms of benefits, that it's just gonna fall off the screen.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yep. And so you kind of segue into something nicely, and I think I don't have the flair for Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon work that I perhaps once did. So it can't fall on myself or other senior leaders at the school. So I think I have identified someone who I think knows the school well and could do this work. They're willing to kind of help out on a consulting basis right now. And so the slide in front of you all now just kind of depicts some of the deliverables of what the first phase of the work might look like over the coming 2 months, which is just the sort of baseline preparation of materials we need to kind of get both the naming rights initiative off the ground as well as the advisory council initiative off the ground. So I feel good about that.
Josh, how much are we paying this person?
This would come in. This would be really beneficial to the school in comparison to what we've put forth before. So
no, I
this
understand, but
this is about a $6,000 investment for this work here, which would probably come in at about significantly more if we went out of house.
Okay, so but this is somebody. Sorry, I'm confused. This is somebody internal to the school.
Yeah, this will probably be. I'd like to bring on Eric Gonzalez to do this work, who, as most folks know, is a co-founder at the school, is really good as a presenter, writes really well, knows the whole story about the school. So there's no sort of like onboarding of someone who's never seen the school before, which is painstaking to have to then onboard, and intrigued by this. So I think he's a solid win for us in terms of doing this work.
Okay, so this whole package is about $6,000, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So I think that's where things are. This was a full-on strategic planning deep dive with some good questions coming forward and some kind of like some advancements with regard to thinking. We'll make some progress with this over the coming month. There isn't going to be that much time between now and our next meeting, about 3 weeks, when including the holiday, but we'll be chipping away at this, and I'll provide an update next month on kind of where we are. So thank you all. I think with that, we move into board meeting assessment and next meeting. Next meeting is December 19th, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. The full holiday season. I imagine us deep diving on the following 4 items. High school IA1 results and response plans, similar to what we did with the middle school tonight. Updates to IA response plans and their efficacy. So we Melissa outlined some really smart strategic work in how we take this data that we've collected in the form of an assessment, act on it so that kids are learning more and more kids are learning more. We'll talk about how that's going next month. We will look at pass rates and some of those other interesting data points that we identified and brought to the board tonight and say, hey, how are we doing now? How are things going? And then as I just mentioned, we'll share out some progress updates on development initiatives for where we are in, again, about a month. So I think with that,